Back rows. Fine for you, old man. The front's for people who actually matter. That's what the usher said with a smirk, not even bothering to check his name. The old man didn't argue, didn't flash credentials, just nodded and sat quietly with a slight limp and a sealed envelope in his coat. 30 minutes later, as a 4-star general took the stage, he spotted the man in the corner and stopped mid-sentence. Then he said 6 words that made the whole room stand, and the organizers wish they could disappear. That man saved 37 American lives. Respect for every forgotten soldier who never stopped earning their place at the front. The sun hung bright over Veterans Memorial Hall that crisp autumn morning. Red, white, and blue bunting draped from every window. Hand-painted banners proclaimed, "We remember," and heroes among us inside volunteers, arranged folding chairs in neat rows, placed programs on each seat, and tested the microphone one last time. It was meant to be a day of honor, a community event celebrating veterans from all branches, all eras. The mayor would speak. A children's choir would sing awards, would be presented to distinguished service members who had returned to civilian life but carried their duty forward through community work. Names had been carefully checked. Bios rehearsed, speeches printed on heavy card stock. The front rows bore reserved signs with gold lettering, everything perfect, polished, prepared at exactly 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony. Harold Quinn approached the entrance. He walked slowly but deliberately, each step measured by necessity rather than choice. A wooden cane supported his right side, the rubber tip worn smooth from years of use. His navy blue coat had seen better, decades clean but frayed at the cuffs, a slight shine at the elbows that spoke of careful preservation rather than neglect. No one looked twice as he entered. No one recognized the name that hadn't appeared in papers since 1968. No one noticed how he scanned the room with eyes still sharp at 79, the same eyes that had once spotted tripwires in dense jungle half a world away. "Can I help you, sir?" The young usher intercepted him, clipboard in hand, scanning for his name among the expected attendees. "Harold Quinn," he said softly. "I received the newsletter about today's ceremony." The usher flipped through several pages. Quinn, not seeing you on the RSVP list, sir." "I didn't RSVP," Harold admitted. "Thought I might just observe." The usher's smile tightened. His eyes flickered to Harold's outdated coat, the worn cane, the gray hair combed neatly across a weathered scalp. His gaze never dropped to the single small bulge in Harold's breast pocket, an envelope sealed with wax. "Back rows. Fine for you, old man. The front's for people who actually matter," the usher said with a dismissive gesture toward the rear of the hall, already turning away to greet a county commissioner in a tailored suit. Harold didn't argue, didn't flash credentials or demand recognition. He simply nodded. Once adjusted his grip on the cane and made his way to the very last row there beside the emergency exit sign. With its harsh red glow, he lowered himself carefully into a metal folding chair that creaked beneath his weight from his vantage point in the shadows. Harold watched as the front rows filled with dignitaries, as cameras were positioned. As the stage was prepped for the distinguished guests who would soon arrive, no one glanced his way. No one noticed the envelope he placed on his lap. Fingers resting protectively over its sealed contents. Inside was a Medal of Honor that had spent 55 years in a drawer because its owner couldn't bear the weight of surviving when others hadn't. Colonel James Merritt, retired, arrived precisely on time, as military habits die hard, dressed in a charcoal suit. With his service pins neatly arranged on his lapel, he took his assigned seat in the third row. His wife, Patricia, squeezed his hand as they settled in, both scanning the program for the morning schedule. As the hall filled with chattering attendees, something caught Merritt's peripheral vision, a particular rhythm of movement, a silhouette that triggered decades-old recognition pathways in his brain. He turned just as Harold Quinn limped past, heading toward the back of the auditorium. The colonel stared, brow furrowing, something about the man's gait, the rigid posture despite the limp, the way he surveyed the room before sitting. It was the unconscious behavior of someone who had spent years in hostile territory. "James, what is it?" Patricia asked, noting her husband's sudden distraction. "That man," Merritt murmured. "Something familiar about him." Unable to place the connection, he discreetly pulled out his phone and typed a name that had surfaced from the depths of his memory. Harold Quinn, then added 3rd Recon Laos, 1967. The search results made his breath catch. Black and white photographs appeared on his screen. A much younger Harold Quinn, receiving the nation's highest military honor from President Johnson. The citation partially visible. Extreme heroism under fire saved 37 men single-handedly held position for 6 hours. Merritt's fingers tightened around his phone. "My God," he whispered. "Patricia, do you know who that is?" "That's Harold Quinn. They've put him in the back row like he's nobody." Patricia glanced back discreetly. "The Quinn from your father's unit?" Merritt nodded already, texting a former colleague now working on the base. Dad said Quinn was the reason half his platoon made it home, said he'd never seen courage like that before, or since his message was simple. "Harold Quinn is here at Memorial Hall unrecognized. Someone needs to know." The response came quickly, confirming, "Stand by." Within minutes, Patricia's phone buzzed with a call. She answered quietly, her expression growing increasingly serious. Merritt could hear only her side. "Yes, that's correct. No, seated in the very back. No recognition whatsoever." "Yes, I understand the significance." As she ended the call, she leaned toward her husband. That was Captain Reynolds from Base Community Relations. "He's escalating. The word Quinn apparently still means something to certain people." The whisper spread quickly after that, from Captain Reynolds to Major Williams, from Williams to Colonel Hart, from Hart directly to General Weller's aide. Each transmission carried increasing urgency. "Harold Quinn is here. He's been disrespected. The Medal of Honor recipient from 67 Laos. The hillside stand exactly." 27 minutes after Colonel Merritt's initial text, a black SUV with military plates pulled up behind Memorial Hall's stage entrance. 4 staff officers emerged, first, followed by General Marcus Weller himself, a decorated commander whose father had served in Vietnam. The general's aide approached, file in hand. "Sir, quick brief on Harold Quinn." General Weller raised his hand, stopping the aide mid-sentence. "I know who Sergeant Major Quinn is. My father made sure I knew." His voice carried the weight of generational respect. "The organizers have seated him in the back row, sir, by the exit." The general's expression didn't change, but something hardened in his eyes. "I see," without another word. He straightened his uniform jacket and walked toward the stage wings, ignoring the event coordinator who rushed forward with last-minute instructions about the ceremony's protocol. Some protocols the general had decided were about to be broken. The ceremony began with practice precision. The children's choir finished America the Beautiful. To enthusiastic applause, the mayor delivered his welcome speech, praising the community's commitment to remembering its heroes. A local businessman received recognition for his charity supporting veterans' housing. Everything proceeded according to the carefully crafted schedule until the announcer stepped forward with a flourish, his voice carrying through the halls. "Excellent acoustics, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct honor to introduce our keynote speaker, a leader who has commanded troops in 3 theaters of operation, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, and currently serving as commander of the 5th Division. Please welcome General Marcus Weller." Applause rose from the audience as General Weller walked to center stage, his uniform impeccable, his bearing commanding. He approached the microphone with the confidence of someone accustomed to addressing thousands. But as he looked out over the crowd, something changed in his demeanor. His prepared remarks remained untouched on the podium as his gaze traveled to the back row and stopped. For 3 long seconds, he said nothing. The applause faded into uncomfortable silence. Event organizers exchanged worried glances. Then General Weller spoke, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority that silenced even the whispers. "That man," he said, pointing directly toward the back corner in the last row on the left. Every head in the audience turned, spotlight shifted, illuminating Harold Quinn, who sat perfectly still beneath the sudden attention. "That's Sergeant Major Harold Quinn," the general continued. The man who carried my father through enemy lines during the Tet Offensive, after both were separated from their unit. Murmurs as rippled through the crowd. Phones emerged as people searched the name. That's the man who, when surrounded on Hill 471 in Laos, held position for 6 hours against overwhelming enemy forces, so 37 wounded Americans could be evacuated. The general's voice grew quieter, yet somehow more powerful, and you seated him by the fire exit without another word. General Weller stepped down from the podium, ignoring the frantic whispers of the event coordinator. He walked deliberately down the center aisle, his footsteps echoing in the now silent hall when he reached Harold Quinn. The general didn't speak. He simply extended his hand after a moment's hesitation. Harold took it and slowly rose to his feet. "Sir," General Weller said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I will not deliver my address today unless you take your rightful place in the front row. Where you belong." Harold's weathered face registered surprise, then something like embarrassment. "General, that's not necessary. I didn't come for recognition." "Then why did you come?" Sergeant Major Harold reached into his coat and withdrew the sealed envelope. He handed it to the general with slightly trembling fingers. "I came to return this," he said, his voice soft but carrying in the hush room. "I wore it long enough, thought today might be appropriate with all the talk of remembering." Generaler opened the envelope carefully. Inside lay a Medal of Honor. Its blue ribbon slightly faded from the years, but the medal itself still gleaming. The general stared at it, then looked back at Harold with understanding dawning in his eyes. "You wore it exactly as long as you needed to, sir," he said. "Now let us carry the weight for a while." He delicately returned the medal to its envelope and offered his arm to Harold. "Will you join me at the front?" Harold nodded once, and together they walked down the aisle, the elderly veteran leaning slightly on the general for support. When they reached the front row, the general personally cleared 2 seats as they sat. General Weller leaned toward the microphone on the nearest stand. "Ladies and gentlemen, today's program will continue, but I will not be speaking instead. I ask for 5 minutes of silence to reflect on what true service and sacrifice look like and how easily we forget to recognize it. When it doesn't announce itself." The stage remained empty for the rest of the program. The planned speeches went undelivered. The prepared awards remained in their boxes backstage in their place. Whispered conversations filled the hall as people researched Harold Quinn on their phones, discovering the stories of his heroism that history had nearly forgotten, and he had never boasted about the man who dismissed him to the back row was nowhere to be found. By sunrise the next morning, Harold Quinn's name had resurfaced from the depths of archived history. Local news outlets scrambled to piece together the story of what happened at Memorial Hall. Veterans who recognized his name from old war stories called in to share memories. The Millbrook Gazette ran a front-page headline that spread quickly to national outlets. "General Halt ceremony after war hero insulted, some honors cannot be scheduled." Beneath it, a photo captured the moment General Weller and Harold Quinn sat together in the front row, the elderly veteran looking slightly uncomfortable, with the attention the general sitting at perfect attention beside him. By noon, the mayor's office had issued a formal apology, promising a full review of our recognition protocols for veterans events. The usher who had directed Harold to the back row submitted his resignation by email, his brief message revealing he had no idea who Quinn was, a fact that only underscored the problem. Veterans groups mobilized with the efficiency that only military training instills. The local VFW chapter announced plans for a proper recognition ceremony for Harold. If he will permit us the honor, 3 different military history museums requested interviews of filmmakers specializing in Vietnam War. Documentaries left 17 messages at Harold's modest apartment. Harold answered none of them, but his absence didn't stop the ripple effects. 1 week after the incident, workers installed a permanent bench at the front of Memorial Hall. A small brass plaque affixed to it read simply, "Reserved for those who never asked to be seen." General Weller, when contacted for comment, issued only a brief statement. Sergeant Major Quinn's quiet dignity speaks louder than any ceremony we could organize. I request that all future events at Memorial Hall begin with the reading of a single name. Sergeant Major Harold Quinn, front row. Always the following spring, when the annual Veterans Recognition Ceremony approached again. The Planning Committee sent a formal invitation to Harold's address. It was returned unopened at the ceremony itself. Now under new management, the front row bench remained conspicuously empty. A single rose lay across it. No one dared sit there. The event opened with a solemn roll call. Sergeant Major Harold Quinn. After 10 seconds of silence, the program continued 3 months later. A small obituary appeared in the Millbrook Gazette. Harold Quinn, 80, passed peacefully in his sleep. No services, at his request donations to Wounded Warrior. Project appreciated only 7 people attended his burial at the National Cemetery. General Weller, among them standing silently in the rain until the simple ceremony concluded. But the next time the Memorial Hall hosted its veteran ceremony, over 500 people stood in silence when the name Sergeant Major Harold Quinn was called. And in the years that followed, that empty bench in the front row became a symbol known throughout the veteran community. Commanders would whisper to young recruits during their first formal events. Remember Quinn's seat. You serve quietly. You serve with honor, and maybe someday you'll earn the right not to ask for it. No greater legacy exists for a soldier than to become a standard by which others measure their duty. Some heroes never stopped serving, even when no one was watching. Some respect isn't given, it's remembered. Subscribe to Iron Heart Stories because some heroes never stop serving.